Hi. Just before I came downstairs to record this, I told my wife it could be more of a venting session. Um, and she wanted to know what I meant by venting and why I had on my Green Lantern t shirt. Um, I think technology, I guess that's where it all stems at. And I've had these conversations before with, and don't mind me fidgeting, I have sometimes I got to do things, and sometimes I got to write down my thoughts. But anyway, um, at 67 years old, um, and in the year 2024, um, I've seen a few things, I guess I should say. Um, and I've seen technology, and I love technology. It's that geek in me, I guess. But sometimes I wonder if going through, or as technology moves forward, if we're not moving backwards. Um, I've had multiple conversations about incoming technology, um, and where it is in today. Um, and before I get to what we're going to, well, what the topic of my conversation is now, and that um, let's just take music. I had a conversation with one of the multimedia members, and if you know anything from the VLA Nation, Felicia, from Conversations with Fee, and we were talking about CDs. Now, if you look behind me, that whole wall of CDs, and let's see, because I'm right here, what to on my screen to my right, probably your left, but anyway, um, those are CDs. And I have to tell you that when CDs were introduced, um, you caught me kicking and screaming not to buy CDs. I came from the world where we had albums, and you could go to the album store and spend hours flipping through different albums to find out not only bargains, but vinyl that you needed. And I was actually a DJ one time, but that's another story. Um, but especially an album like Funkadelic with the art by Pedro Bell, you could find every time you pick up the album, you could find some other nuances and things that he put in there. But I was always one to read the rear of the album and see stuff like uh, who was the drummer, who guest starred, and things like that. Um, so you know that it was a different world. Then when CDs came in, um, you know, some of the information was still there, but just smaller. And being young at that time, I probably could read it. Now I would have to use my glasses to read it. But um, and it's a little bittersweet because um, my buddies Chuck Mabry and Reginald Mumley, who bless their souls aren't here, whose some of these CDs that are in on that wall and behind and sitting in multiple CD disc players. Some of them are theirs, from their collections. Um, Reggie actually had placed me in his with his family, that if something should happen to him, I would get his CDs. Um, but anyway, let's get into what I'm saying. As you move into the future with different technologies, now even the CDs are dwindling. If you look at some place like Best Buy, who has closed multiple stores, um, their their CD section is maybe a eighth of what it used to be. Um, Now it's everything is streaming, um, and I guess it has its place, but it takes away from that tactile of actually holding it in your hands. So let me get back because I've rambled on for 5 minutes looking at the clock, and to where I am today. Comics were I started collecting comics when I was 7 years old, so that's been over 60 years ago. Uh, and up to a few years ago, I was still collecting them, still interested in them, but still collecting them because I hadn't read a comic in a while. And then with the death of one of my best friends, I didn't lose interest, but I lost motivation on reading them. But getting back to when I started buying comics and collecting comics, and um, I was a young kid then, 7 years old, so I was writing my names in the borders of the comics and cutting them out, uh, not realizing then that um, that was money that I was destroying because those comics are very if you would try to get one of the original copies, it would be very expensive. When I started collecting comics, I think in 1963 the comics were about 12 cents a piece, um, and I think it was probably some 10 cents still somewhere around, but 12 cents a piece, and through the years I saw them go up. Um, and even back then, they didn't take them very seriously because you could get a comic for half price, but they would cut half the cover off, and put it in a spindle and sell it at a discount price, not knowing that it would be worth money in the future. And I'll just go through this spiel because there's another one on just where comic collecting is today, but that's not why I'm doing this. Um, I would like to probably admit that um, I was probably a nerdy kid. When I was young, I liked science, and I sold greeting cards so I could make all of the points and buy the science sets. And my interest in comics were, it was a way to get away from things. And even back then, and not to knock DC and Batman and Superman, but the Marvel comics, the dialogue was better. They were in real places like New York instead of Metropolis and Gotham City. Um, but I went, or I shouldn't say I went, I read just anything I could get my hands on. Um, and I would probably tend to think that my English, both spoken and written, could be owed to reading comics, where they didn't talk in slang, but they talked in a more um, theatrical way. But then that would have me looking for what this word meant. So I think as a young kid, um, my vernacular was a bit better um, because that I was reading comics. Um, Even those two glass cases that you see that's lit up in blue, one is a Marvel case and it has different Marvel memorabilia in it, and the other one is a DC case. You might be able to make out, I'm just looking at the camera, that the top one has a lot of the Batman memorabilia, and in that case it's just two. But anyway, and I go from, maybe I have ADD. Maybe, probably most people would say yes anyway. But anyway, I think my vernacular got better as it went along. Um, so I found out the value of comics, start keeping them as much as possible, stop writing in the lines and such in my teens. And I went from comics to novels. And um, Uh, sort of like comics. When I got into novels, I started to get into maybe the pulp type heroes, Doc Savage, the Avenger, Michael Moorcock's entire um, Eternal Champion series, Elric, Hawkmoon, Corum. Um, I just would just read, a lot. I had a lot of Doc Savages, though I don't have them all in perfect order. To the where you see the chairs sitting behind me, you'll see just the the, the outline of a bookcase, and in that bookcase is a lot of the novels that I have kept in there. There was a person called the Avenger, who was written by the same guy that wrote Doc Savage, and Paul Robeson was very forward in what he was doing. On the Avengers team, he had a black couple that would do his spine for him. Very forward in the way that he portrayed African Americans, especially in the time that he was writing, which would have been, I think, the 40s. But anyway, I graduated to novels, and I would just buy novels. There used to be a store here, Tales of the White Hart. I would buy them there, and there was a bookstore down in Charles Village that's no longer there, and you would never even know it was there, where I would buy a lot of this and sit. When I was in Pensacola, bookstore there, and I would buy them, and I would sit either on benches that were right there at that mall, or a couple places that I just rocky outcrops where I would read those comics, novels. I'm sorry, novels. Okay, so as I got older, I started getting into work. I found out I had less and less time to read. The interest was still there, but I didn't have much time to read because I was commuting from Baltimore to D.C. and back, and then on the weekends it was party time, and I was in D.C. almost every weekend, and I partied every weekend, and the interest was there. But as often as the thing, I still collected comics, and then I was still reading them. I didn't collect them to the degree that I was probably when I was younger. I was more selective because the prices had changed. So I watched the prices go up and complain the whole time. And I think I haven't bought a comic now since my friend passed, but if I'm not mistaken, they're around the 250. I would have to look. Like I said, I bought something, but I just kind of picked it up. But for the cost of one comic these days, I probably could have got 25, 30 when I was younger. But of course, things change as you move along. All right, so then a good friend of mine introduced me to a author that I follow to this very day. Dale introduced me to Infected by Scott Siegler, and he had it on a disc, on a CD, and I got into books on CD. Again, in that case, there are books on CD. Wicked, which is coming out in a movie sometime in the next year. Another Piers Anthony wrote a series that I enjoyed called Incarnations of Immortality. I have all of those on CD behind me. But as I went along with following Scott Siegler, Scott started releasing his works in serialized. Every week he would put out a different portion of a book, and I got into that. step up now. Well, let me stay back in the podcast days. I'm sorry. Back in the podcast, there were a lot of fledgling authors. Scott happened to uh, um, become a New York bestseller. But there were a lot of stuff out there that was actually very good that they released in a serialized version. Scott was one of the first. And there used to be a site called Audio 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 Drama Dictionary, I think it was called. And there were a lot of different people that would put out different things. At some time, I might talk about some of those that were and probably still are my favorite, because they were serialized and being released like that. Um, I downloaded them and put them on my PC and on USB so I can listen to them later. Some of that stuff now is sold because a lot of what I listen to for free, Audible has swooped in and bought up all of that, and now Audible is a lot of the ways you can, the major way that you can get a lot of this stuff that was on podcast. They've reworked it and turned it into audiobooks. One of my favorite serialized, besides Scott Siegler stuff, and his stuff range from supernatural to horror. His Infected trilogy is just, if you haven't listened to it, listen to it. If you haven't, if you have a subscription with Audible, definitely get the Infected trilogy by Scott Siegler. But like I said, all of that was free. Probably, besides Scott's all of his novels, my favorite full audio is the Leviathan Chronicles. That when I was still working for the Bureau, we were doing a lot of traveling then on our rollout of smartphones. And between Dale and I, we made a lot of converts to the Leviathan Chronicles. Leviathan Chronicle is available from its own website and Patreon, but it is full audio. You could put your headphones on and listen to this, and without seeing anything, it was like a movie inside your head. Now, some people I've talked to some people about it, and they have actually said that, hey, isn't that just like the radio serials back in the day, the Shadow and the Batman radio serials, the Lone Ranger, the Shadow. It is, and they had limited ways of creating sound effects back then. But if you listen to something like the Leviathan Chronicles, you will hear the motorcycles revving and bullets and cars smashing. It's definitely a movie for your ears. But then again, I coming up and all of that was free. And I do know the production value because at some later date, the Leviathan Chronicles were sold as different chapters, and I purchased them because it's very well done, and it it costs to do that. I understand the editing, the voice talents that you have to do. So it costs to do that. So I was no problem. I'm doing that. I would like to mention my wife's probably favorite because she was very hesitant when I told her about books on CDs and tapes and podcasts. But she fell in love with We're Alive, and I think it's Wayland Productions. I think they have their own website as well. And she informed me that that's available on Audible. But again, when I started downloading We're Alive, it was free then. So, but now because Audible has basically, just like Amazon has just swooped in and gotten it, you won't find those free versions of anything now. At least I haven't. I have them saved on my PC, and for prosperity, I've saved some to different USB drives. So if anything happened to my PC, I'll still have them, and they're worth a listen. Leviathan Chronicles, I can't tell you how many times I listened to it, start to finish, and they're working on new episodes because it did come to an end. There was a hiatus. Because this creator was dealing with some things, and Christoph, and one thing I like about Christoph Lapulka is that I've actually chatted back and forth with him. Same thing with Scott Siegler. So it feels real good that I can reach out to them, or that I have reached out to them. And I subscribe to both Lapulka and or Leviathan Chronicles and Scott Siegler's work. But again, it like I say, I like it. It is. I started listening to it as I drove back and forth to DC, and I like to thank my girls in my van pool. They called me father, among other things, but they were very tolerant. I would let them at least close their eyes, but they were very tolerant as I listened to some of my serialized fiction, and I thank them for that. Each and every one of them still have a special place in my heart, even though I retired over back in 2012. But again, there was a lot of talent out there, a lot of talent that did not make that conversion into audio books. Like I said, my wife did tell me that We're Alive is in an audio book. I will probably get it because I have a lot of Audible credits. But while it has made me, I don't want to say it made me lazy. I just don't have the time that I had when I was younger to actually sit. One of the things I said I was going to do when I retired, which it is now 2024, I retired in 2012. I said I was going to just take an hour every day and don't answer the phone, play games, put on the TV, and just take an hour to read every day. That was in 2012. It is now 2024. And not once did I take an hour to shut off my phone, shut off the TV, and just read. It's here. It's here. I have, if I would start today and I read 15 books a day, it would probably take me close to a year or more. I have a lot of stuff sitting in cabinets and bins that I was interested in reading, but I didn't. At least here in Pensacola, I talked to my niece who did not like reading when she was young. I introduced her to some things that I bought down at the Patapsco Flea Market, and she is still reading to this very day. We went on our vacation in July, and she probably did 3 books in that week that we were there. But where I live down in an area not far from here called Pikesville, there was a huge Barnes & Noble. Was no longer there. As a matter of fact, I probably couldn't tell you where there's a Barnes & Noble, and I'm sure it's somewhere, and I don't know if it was because everybody's going audio that Barnes & Noble is closed, or the one that by me closed. But my niece says in Pensacola, that the Barnes and Noble is still there, and that Books A Million that's in one of our malls is still there. Um, but I will admit that it has, listening audio wise, I'm able to do it because one of the things I do is a lot of driving. Whether it is to Pensacola or meeting some of the guys that I used to work with uh, for our get together that we try to get once a month. We have really reestablished that, but we do still try to spend time together. And just between driving, between church and the part-time job that I have, uh, I do listen to audiobooks. Um, but even in that, I recognize that the technology that gives us the audiobooks has probably cost some people their businesses, definitely jobs. Like I say, the Barnes and Noble closed, but if there are some, there were people that worked in some of the bookstores. Um, you don't see that as much, at least here. Um, Independent bookstores, like I say, Tales of the White Hart, that used to be not far on the corridor of Waverly. Um, Stores like that, I don't know many that exist anymore. And I guess Barnes and Noble kind of swallowed them up, the little small independent bookstores. So um, I guess again, that's as we move forward with technology and just a different business model has cost some maybe mom and pop stores business. Um, when I was young, I worked in a place called Neptune's Den on Monument Street. It was a fish store, pet store. We had fish and we had some reptiles in it, but it was in a house. You don't find anything like that now because there's PetSmart and Petco and um, I do know of one place in I guess that would be Cockeysville, Timonium, that is a dedicated fish store. But I remember being young where you could buy your fish in Woolworths. There was a section for fish in Woolworths. Um, but anyway, back to the uh, um, the comic books novels podcast and Audible. So Audible now is things I got for free. I do have a subscription to Audible. It's $15-16 a month. I'm not listening. Like I say, I'm doing a lot of listening, but I'm not sitting home listening. I don't get a chance to do that. I do listen to my music while I'm sitting here at my desk. And I've yet to try to listen to a book because of the things that I work on while I'm sitting at my desk. The music kind of complements that, and it's non-evasive in my thoughts and what I'm working on. I think I couldn't concentrate on a book if I really tried to listen to it at the time. But I just recognize, and at some point on one of my contents, I want to talk about AI. Um, we're looking at AI as it grows, but I'm from that Terminator generation, and a lot of the background for the Terminator series and Skynet, uh, I'm still leery. While I'm still a nerd and I still like science and I still like technology and advancements, I do worry about how much control that we're willing to give it. Um, I can't remember whether it was Pastor Phil or Phil Miller that told me, or somebody told me, that in some of the Asian countries that They even have simulated humans checking you into your hotels. Um, I'm sure. I mean, I know there are routines, subroutines, and programs as such as to what you say, how you say it, and how it looks up. It's no what you call independent thought, but they're working on it. So um, I guess I'm just like I said, at 67, seeing the extent of what I've seen in the world and um, where I am now. Um, uh, Still a nerd um, in thoughts. I still collect. I collect. I haven't collected comics, like I say, since the passing of my friend, and it's going on, I think, 2 years now. I've just picked up some little stuff here and there. Um, my music I still collect because I listen to that when I'm driving. I can listen to it here, and again, I'm tactile. Um, but even some of the stuff I bought from Amazon, and I can't prove it, and I haven't looked it up, but it almost looks like some of the stuff I've bought has been printed on demand, both the CD and the covers that it's in. Um, Most of the stuff you see behind me is in the plastic cases, but there's some that are in. I don't have any right here. Most of these are plastic cases, just in the paper kind of sleeves. Um, yeah, I don't have any here. I have a lot of things sitting here, and thank God you can't see how cluttered my area is. But I still do. Um, just had a CD come in the other day that I didn't know existed. But again, that's another thing because uh, we knew what was coming out when it was coming out. I remember where I worked at, where we weren't when I first started there. We didn't have the freedom to really so much walk out the building and do things. But whenever Prince would drop an album, I would leave out and go up 9th Street and then cut across to that wasn't Tower Records. It escapes me. I want to say Douglas maybe, but it was a record store that was not far from the job, and I had to sneak back in with it. Things relaxed later, and we came and go as we pleased. But we couldn't be gone too long because the supervisor would know you were gone. But anyway, so I'm just and this, from the comic books to the novels to the podcast to Audible, digital comics, and such. I don't sit and read, and I think one of the things, and my wife and I talked about it, that summed it up is that was quiet time. It was relaxing. I look at my niece when we were away. She was very relaxed reading her books. Though when I am listening to our books, when me and my wife were traveling, we're listening to that breaks up the monotony. That's one time I like her to rest, but we listen to books on through Audible, through the system in the car. But depended on it, what I'm listening to. Scott Siegler is still putting out something. If you want some gory, just blood everywhere, but very fun, a very fun story. You might want to pick up his Slay Book 1 that's available on Audible. He has released, and Scott Siegler has always been a person of his time, so he would do live reads on Facebook and YouTube, and then the following week he would release it on Spotify, where you could release it for free. But again, I listened to all of Slay when it was released on Spotify, and I was only too glad to buy it when it was released on Audible. He just finished Slay Season 2, Book 2, and when he releases that, again, I'll buy it. Um, so I'm not knocking so much. I guess I started this out talking about venting. I'm not knocking so much the fact that we've gone from a large footprint of written word, i.e., comics and novels and such, to a virtual digital footprint of listening, whether it's in podcasts, which are still available, to Audible audio books, which Audible has the lion's share of it. There's a small company out there called Chirp, but you will find some of the maybe novice writers on Chirp, and I probably need to get back to Chirp because there are people out there that want to write. Speaking of Scott Siegler, he said earlier this year is that there are now going to be vehicles with AI where you can plug in your characters and places and stuff like that, and the AI will help you write the book. I've seen, and I haven't really dove into it, but I've seen what appears to be the same thing about music, where you can put in your lyrics and such, and it'll help you with that. But where's the creativity? I guess I'm asking. If AI is writing your music, your beats, and helping you with your lyrics, where are your creativities? You know, your Tupacs, your Jay-Z's, they came up writing this stuff, writing from their heart and doing it on notebook pads and composition books now. But now you're telling me that you can just plug it in and then, you know, you can get a song. You can plug your stuff in and it'll help you write a novel. Where, you know, your Scott Sieglers and Bottaducci's, who else do I have? Your Michael Moorcocks. This all came from their minds. Your Robesons, it came from their minds. They didn't have, many of them at the time of the books I read, they didn't have electric typewriters, you know. They didn't have PCs and stuff to store it and save it and then come back to it the next day. This was on paper and they had to really get to it. So again, I say that to, I don't, it's not that I'm not taking advantage of technology. It's not to say I don't use technology, but I sit back and I think I would rather read or listen to something from the Scott Sieglers of the world that's coming from their imaginations, and then it's not coming through something that's AI driven, that's pulling writing styles from other authors, other writers, and creating it in that style. Because if I'm not mistaken, you could probably put in something and put in a style of someone, and it writes it in that vein. So, but anyway, like I said, I'm actually shooting this and not knowing whether I'm going to put it out. Most of the content I put out on VLF Nation, I'm not looking for it to be, you know, monetized. There's none of my content now that have gotten over maybe 104, 105 viewers. I like doing it. There's different content I put out for different reasons, and this content is going to be really different because I've never did just a one-on-one talking about something that was in my head. But again, it's just a 67-year-old man maybe feeling nostalgic about where I came from and what I did, and looking at the world in which it is now. I dealt with comics and novels and podcasts and Audible. Now I might pick one of those and get deeper into it. Um, I definitely have some things to say about uh, music in the sense that I know music. Um, and I'm not knocking some things, but a lot of the female artists sound alike. I couldn't tell you one person from the next. But back in the day, you could tell Whitney from Aaliyah. You could tell uh, 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 Left Eye and Coco, and you can tell them apart. Um, Now I couldn't tell you apart. And what I hear now, sometimes I like the beats, but the lyrics, sometimes they leave me wanting. Um, but that's a conversation for another day. So, um, thanks for listening to me ramble or vent or just getting a bit nostalgic. So, like I said, I don't know whether I'll use this footage. I don't even know what it will, if I release it, what it's going to be called. But anyway, thanks for indulging me. Um, and as I say with anything that I release on the VLF Nation, thank you for tuning in and be blessed. Have a good day, evening, or whenever you're listening to this. Take care.